Hello there. Thank you for joining me in Talbert Craft Corner. And what actually brings us to Talbert Craft Corner? Well, when I was born into a craft corner. Or, well, let me put it this way. My mother was a seamstress, tailor, sewist, whichever word we'll use for that. But she was a queen behind the sewing machine. And because of that, I was born into it. It was going to be some craft. However, you didn't touch mom's sewing machines. So it started somewhere different. And naturally, some piece of it was going to end up in all of us. My sister sews, even my younger brother does some sewing. And I sew, maybe not to that degree, but I've made some items. You know, you guys out there know that when your kids find out you can do something and they want or need something, next thing you know, you're making it. But the craft was there. When I was 11, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to crochet. They say that's easier. I'm going to knit. Well, then I started knitting. So I was really knitting for a good long while. Tried my hand at crochet and felt, it's not really my thing. Then I tried it again and said, yeah, it's still not my thing. It's not turning out right. And then who knows it? But once Miss Rebecca, one of our other Talbert Craft Corner crafters, started crocheting because knitting was too slow for her. And I said, okay, then let me pick up this hand of crocheting again and see what I can do with it. And go ahead, teach this old dog some new tricks, learn what was happening with my crocheting. So she was doing it, and she would make little plushies, animals, all kinds of stuff, and it just came out right. Every time I did something, it was too big, and I just could not figure out why. Watching YouTube videos, reading. I initially learned from a book because, we didn't have YouTube then, so the pictures didn't explain this to me, but it was one simple thing, really, and it was watching her live in person right there looking at her that I figured out what I was doing. It's something you don't have to worry about in knitting, because in knitting, the needle is determining how wide you are with every stitch. You're making it as wide as that needle. But when it came to crochet, you have control. Like they say, a machine can't do it. And I think that's part of the reason too. You have control. Every time that you pull up that stitch, you have to kind of give it a little pull. That's why everybody's tension is a little different too. But you have to give it a little pull. I wasn't giving it a pull. So mine, one stitch could be huge, one stitch is small, and things just weren't working out. So needless to say, yes, I cleaned up my crochet craft by listening to my daughter or watching her, somewhere in between the two. But now I can really enjoy, I keep the long-term projects that I know I want to knit. Some things can be quicker, like small things like hats, but some of the long-term projects I have, it's a leisurely knit. If I want to just pop something out quite a bit faster actually, I'll crochet it, like the top I had on in our welcome video. Also, this top I have on here is crocheted. And to be honest, I made things and never thought to make anything for myself put together, but I never really made anything for myself, a wearable and a true wearable. So this was the first one I made that I'm wearing here today. This top here. Follow the YouTube pattern, but I was able to make it to my size dimensions. And we got to remember, with crochet and knitted items in general, they have a tendency to grow. So I was doing it and felt like it was right, but then it wasn't right. But after you take it off, and actually if you steam block it, it really can go to where you want it with acrylic yarn. So here we are. So I made this top, my first Tara original crocheted wearable. One of the other first things I did when I figured out how to do the right number of stitches in each row without it shrinking or growing, and also getting my stitches to be more consistent, is what's on this chair here behind me. It's a really long shawl. It took various colors of Karen Simply Soft, which is one of my favorite yarns to work with. I love the little sheen it has. That's actually what this is made out of as well. I took all varying colors of it, the variegateds, the solids, and it's pretty long. I'm sitting on part of it, and just kept going. And it has the little holes in it at certain points that you have to specifically make. And it was a good project to just have me keep going. Did it in the car and otherwise. So that's what brings us to this crafty corner. I enjoy doing these mini crafts. I'm not behind a sewing machine too often, but my Becky has definitely picked up that mantle from her grandmother, and she's gone away with it. You might see right here, this is the project she was sewing in our welcome video. It is a quilt. Yes, she is quilting, and it looks pretty good. This isn't the only one she finished either. She had another one sitting, not quite done, that she's finished up. It's a hexagon. I'll showcase that one. We'll give her a segment, showcase her items, and quite a few other things she has in the bin. No, a bin would be a trash can for those of you in other parts of the world. So not that kind of bin. In the queue. Yes, definitely in the queue. And in the crafting world, we call them whips, works in progress. So there are several of those that she has, that I have. Well, also another thing I'm working on, which I'm hoping Talbot Craft Corner helps me to finish up some of those whips, is this here. I was inspired by Jean, our beloved Jean Truelove, to mix the crafts, and then found out there's actually a book that has it mixed, so it's not an original idea, but it's something that I said, hey, let me try that. I came across one of the people I follow on YouTube, the crafters, and she had this quilt that would, this blanket throw. It's not really a full-size blanket, um, that was inspired by quilts. So here I have this, one of the squares that will go together to become a throw that is quilt inspired. So then I was inspired from an inspiration. So Jean inspired me to think of crochet and how much it can look like a quilt. And then I found a pattern where someone made a crocheted blanket throw that was quilt inspired. And then I sell a book that does the same thing, shows a crocheted version and a quilted version. And then my daughter here decides that she's going to quilt. So I said, hey, this is really cool. I see all these quilters doing block of the month. And I thought, hey, what if we do a block? I crochet it, Becky quilts it, and in the end, we'll have a quilt. Maybe we'll do one a month. Who knows? We may get really jazzed up and do more than that. But my original plan is to try to at least do one a month. And then have that there series going. So we'll have kind of separate from this, because she's not going to quilt this. This is a totally different project, but I do want to finish that and let everyone see how that turned out. So I'm going to have her make me just a single square block. Trying to use the right terminology. Sorry, quilters. Have her make me a block, one of these chevron blocks, and I will make a crocheted version of that same block. Try to stick to the same type color pattern. And so we'll have a crocheted block that matches this quilt block, and have a series going on with that. With I'll crochet it, she'll quilt it, and some inspiration going there. And I guess at some point I might have a sampler. No, I'll have a sampler crocheted together. Knowing her, and based on this, she'll end up having several quilts that are a complete version of whichever one we do. Or maybe we'll do a sampler. And to be sure, I am definitely awed by where my daughters have taken this legacy of crafting that started with my dear mother, and the what I've given to them, and then how they've taken it and ran with the things that they do. To be honest, the tedium of the things that VJ does, but she can get into a zone and really get them done, as we see with that bedazzling. And she has some other projects that she's done with that. So I'll just showcase her items. And we'll get Becky on and showcase some of the things that she's done. And meanwhile, I'll get working on finishing up a whip and have her get me that quilt block so that I can choose some colors. And we'll work on choosing the colors that I use to make my crochet version of her quilt block. Thank you for joining me here in Talbert Corner. Let's show you some more stuff. Take a look. Here we have VJ modeling the granny square sweater that I was crocheting in our welcome video. It has 6 10-inch granny squares in the front, 6 in the back, and it's seamed on the sides. Then granny stitch sleeves are added to both sides. We have some close-ups and then some movement. Thank you, VJ. Miss V is under the weather, so we've added in one of her other creations, a bedazzled Brandon Marsh jersey. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us in the Talbert Craft Corner. Well, it's a different corner, but still a Talbert Craft Corner. So we'll ask you the same question that I answered in my interview of sorts. What brings you to a Talbert Craft Corner?
Well, I was born in the Talbert Craft Corner, molded by it. It was merely part of my being from the beginning.
Do you have any crafts maybe surrounding us that you'd like to share with us? Aside from what we know we'll see in the videos.
I have I can totally make that attitude. So 9 times out of 10, when I see something, my first thought is, let me try and make that, not let me buy that. So I have crochet, started quilting, I've done these paintings, and and they all were kind of group of things where it's like, I have these skills, or I can totally obtain these skills, and so I can totally make them.
So with your sewing, you have made some garments, even though now you're delving into quilting. What made you start making any clothes, or tell us how you started making some clothes?
There were a couple of very feeble early attempts where I did not fully understand seam allowances, and so I kind of gave up on wearables because those first very feeble attempts, sizing was definitely not achieved. For a while, I switched to making things like bags and accessories, and then more recently, I got into costuming and garment making because I had a hard time finding what I wanted, and so I just figured out, well, I can just tweak and or completely draft exactly what I want.
What do you mean by draft? You mean you open up a pattern and then you just cut out pieces and sew it together, right?
Maybe you do that, but I crack out the paper and use measurements and vibes to create a vision, along with tips and tricks I've learned from the University of YouTube, as you love to say.
Okay. Well, that sounds awesome. Okay, so you make things, but what about something that's already made and might not fit just right? Have you worked in that kind of thing?
Due to someone who may or may not be my little sister, I've become pretty well versed in alterations due to the fact that she will thrift something and say, okay, now make this fit.
And I happen to know that she's also mended or altered some items for some people that we know and did a pretty fantastic job at that. I believe, as you can see, I'm quite proud of her. Those paintings are free-handed, by the way. She didn't get it traced. It wasn't already on the canvas. So, are you working on anything that we should be looking forward to in upcoming videos?
I mean, the whips are endless. Currently, at the moment, um, the main things I'm trying to complete are I'm making myself a new coat. Um, I'm working on a rather elaborate quilt, and I have a couple crochet projects in the works.
That sounds awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Luz.